Hello, and welcome back to our continuing webinar series on creating HDSLR video for photographers. If you're new to us, this webinar series is dedicated to providing viewers with a practical understanding of creating HDSLR video and explaining which tools and techniques will help convert their photographic knowledge into filmmaking prowess. Today, we will investigate the concept of focus and what tips and tools will help make the next step more easy for you as you move beyond the still and closer towards unlocking your hidden filmmaker. Now, I do want to take a moment to thank Cinevate for sponsoring today's webinar. For those of you who don't know about Cinevate, they develop filmmaking tools to help guys like me create better content. They have some amazing videos and educational content on their website, so I really encourage you to visit them at www.cinevate.com. Now, I also want to give a quick shout out to my friends from Pete Wright Photography and Triple Scoop Music for helping us out with this month's webinar project. Now, if you're wondering what I'm talking about, stick around and you'll see. Now, last time, we discussed how your existing photographic tools, combined with a little creativity, could go a long way in creating compelling video content. We talked about the gear, what camera settings to use, and ultimately how those things can be combined to make your first video project. If you happen to have missed that webinar, you can catch it on Cinevate's website. Just look on the right-hand side for a little thumbnail of me making a weird face. At any rate, on to today's subject, focus. The number one problem photographers face when capturing video with HDSLRs is focus. Imagine shooting for 10 hours and not being able to use any of your footage because it's out of focus. Now, you are here today to turn these potential stumbling blocks into stepping stones and get yourselves one step closer to creating better video more easily and effectively every time. Now, HDSLRs don't have autofocus to help us out in video, and it can be difficult to tell what's actually in focus when you're looking at the back of the camera. Now, there are a few other things too, but generally speaking, these are two of the biggest obstacles in using HDSLRs for video. Manual focus is an important aspect of any film project. In its simplest form, it's a basic skill. However, when we explore the depths of what focus can do for us as filmmakers, a world of creative opportunities are revealed. Focus is among one of the only ways for filmmakers to communicate directly with their audience. It can be argued that it's the most important asset a filmmaker has in creating a film. Now, there are a lot of possibilities with what we can do with focus. And as we continue through today's webinar, you will see that using focus is one of the easiest, direct, and most unobtrusive ways of communicating directly to your audience. Now check out this clip to see exactly what I'm talking about. As you saw from the quick example, being able to choose and direct focus is important because it allows a filmmaker to direct your eyes where he wants them to go. In some cases, they don't even need to move the camera. A simple focused movement is sometimes all it takes to get you to look from one thing to another. Now, understanding this concept becomes very powerful when you think about it as a tool for storytelling. Now, try to think about that as you continue to film your own projects. Practice the art of using focus as a tool. Practice using it to convey feelings. Even if you think you're doing it wrong, practice. Now, you are directing the viewer's eye by choosing what's in focus. So practice. For example, how would you convey sleepiness with focus? How would you convey excitement or distraction? For me, sleepiness can be conveyed by periodically shifting the lens in and out of focus slowly. Excitement can be shown as quick, decisive focus movements to different objects within a scene, whereas distraction can be portrayed as slow or fast, unpredictable focus movements throughout a scene. Regardless of how you see the world, understanding how to convey your feeling of the world through focus is very important. Now take a look at this next clip. How does it make you feel? More importantly, how does the use of focus in the clip help you feel about the overall mood of the clip? This is a really important filmmaking concept, and I really encourage you to explore things like this as you continue to practice your skills. Now that we've talked about focus as a creative tool, I think it's time we talk about the techniques and tools related to it. Now, there are a few things that can help us achieve focus. Now, two of these things are measuring focus and controlling depth of field through aperture. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. The easiest way to understand why someone would want to measure focus would be to revisit one of the shots from our last webinar. Now, in that shot, the camera was literally placed inside the cabinet. Now, since I couldn't see the back of the camera, I had to do something else to make sure my image was in focus. So I did the easiest thing I could. I used a tape measure, and I measured from the camera to Brian. I then set my lens to the distance and measured, and that was it. Now, this is something very easy that you can do for yourself on your own shoots. You'll just need to pay attention to one thing, where your focal plane indicator is. Now, if you're looking at the picture on the slide, the little circle with a line through it is, in fact, the focal plane indicator. It's a universal sign. So look around the camera for it, and you should be able to see it somewhere on the camera body. Now, once you find it, grab your tape measure, measure the distance from that spot on your camera to a spot on your subject. Here's a tip. Measure to the person's eye. That tends to be a great place to aim for since there's so much detail. After you measure, set the lens to the measured distance, and you're all set. Now, as you do this more and more, you'll be able to tell distances without a tape measure. It'll end up even being almost faster than anything. And until you get that good, though, just make sure that you have a tape measure handy. Now, another aspect that affects focus is something called depth of field. For those of you that don't know how apertures work, it's pretty simple. Apertures like 2.8 have a very shallow depth of field, while apertures like 11 have a very deep depth of field. This concept is important when we look at how it affects what we capture. Now, for example, if I'm going to capture an event like a wedding reception or a live concert, I'd be more inclined to use an aperture like 5.6. Events are unpredictable, and using an aperture like 5.6 or 8 is a great safety net when I don't know where the action is going to be. On the other hand, when I'm in a controlled situation and have time to slow down, I'll often go to a shallower depth of field to create a sliver of focus in my image. Now, this sort of imagery is what I call cutaway material or detail shots, and having that helps me have more material to use as I get to the editing room. Now, the most important thing to think about when choosing your aperture is to ask yourself one question. What do you want the image to look like? Do you really want shallow depth of field in a close-up? Try 2.8. Do you have two people standing in a two-shot and want the background blurry? Well, try 5.6. Do you want deep depth of field in a wide shot? Well, try 5.6. Taking the time to ask yourself these questions will really help you see your footage before capturing it. Visualizing is the key. And as you do that, you'll grow as a cinematographer. Now, outside of measuring focus and understanding depth of field, there are a few other tools that can help you with achieving focus. The first of these is actually on your camera. On my Canon 5D Mark II, I'm able to check if my image is in focus by pressing a button. One press will magnify the image on my LCD screen by 5 times. Another press will magnify it by 10 times. A third press will return me to the unmagnified image on my LCD. Now, if you're looking at the next slide, the blue magnifying glass on the right is that button. Now, it's a great way to check focus, but doesn't work when the camera's recording. This can be a problem. So using a viewfinder to sidestep that obstacle is a great solution because it magnifies the LCD screen so we can more easily see what we're trying to get in focus. Now, Cinevate makes a great viewfinder. It's called the Cyclops, and it's a great tool for me because it magnifies the LCD, shades the screen from outside light, and allows me to quickly and accurately check the framing and focus of my footage as I'm capturing it. It's a really unique tool because I get to use 2 eyes and can stand pretty far away from the whole thing and see my image clearly and easily. Now, outside of a viewfinder, I've found that lens gears and focus levers are also great tools in helping me achieve focus. Still, lenses are relatively small, and as a result, it can sometimes be difficult to achieve critical focus. A lens gear like this is a great tool because it enlarges the barrel of the lens, making it easier to incrementally focus into a subject. Now, this is probably one of the most inexpensive ways of helping yourself achieve focus and is really crucial if you're going to be using shallow depth of fields. Now, in addition to a gear, I have the option of adding a focus lever to get my hand off the lens. This helps me minimize the amount of shake I'm introducing into the footage as I try to get focus. Now, as we look at the list of tools available for helping us achieve focus, perhaps the most elegant and sophisticated solution is found in using a tool called a follow focus. For those of you that do not know what a follow focus is, it's basically a tool that intersects with the lens to make the process of focusing a lens easier and repeatable. Because of the way it's designed, there are a number of features that a follow focus possesses which make it ideal for some situations. From the act of achieving focus to the task of repeating it over multiple moves, a follow focus is a great tool to accurately achieve focus between subjects every time. Let's take a look at a video here and watch as we pull focus from one place to another. To do this easily, we need a follow focus. Now, setting up a follow focus is pretty quick. First, attach your own gear to your lens, and then mount the follow focus camera to the rail system. Next, you want to engage the follow focus with the gear ring. And from here, find your froze focus point and mark the dry erase ring when it's in focus. Now, then you're going to navigate on your LCD to the next point, zoom in, find your focus, and mark your second point on the dry erase ring. And finally, use both points as a tool when pulling focus in the scene. So let's watch it again. Something very simple can be done very easily and, most importantly, be repeatable because I'm using a follow focus. It's pretty easy, right? How'd that feel? I think it's pretty cool. Well, now that we've talked about focus, I think it's time to show you how I use some of today's tools in a recent project I did with Pete Wright. He's a great friend of mine out of Richmond, Virginia, and Pete photographs weddings and portraits all over the country. And he was nice enough to come spend a few hours working with me to build some of this content. So thanks to Pete, and thanks to Triple Scoop Music for providing us the royalty-free soundtrack for this piece. Now enjoy the video, and I'll catch you after it's done. Now, for those of you that recognize the title of this slide, fusion has become a big buzzword within the photo industry over the past few years. It's quite literally the fusing of still images with moving images into one multimedia piece. The purpose of showing you this piece today is to illustrate to you the possibilities of video in a world that we are all already intimately familiar with. If you're a photographer and you have a few sessions coming up, spending some time to get the footage is a great way to experiment with video. Doing this will ultimately allow you to provide a broader experience to your customers and potentially expand your business. Now is the time to start trying video. So what are you waiting for? Now, as we look at this piece, I think it's important to go over some of the decisions I made as a filmmaker so you can get a feel for why I made some of my decisions. And for starters, before I turned on my camera, I decided to use a limited amount of equipment and concentrated on creating a mood through the images that I captured. Using a few of the tools we talked about last time, And this time, I feel that I was able to do this. One of the specific choices I made for this was to rely solely on my monopod for camera support, because I felt it gave me a quality of footage that lent itself towards the setting and the mood of the piece. When I talked to Pete about the overall concept of the shoot, he mentioned that he wanted it to feel unfinished and unpolished. He also mentioned it was supposed to be set after the wedding. So I couldn't help that it implied that there was a bit of a hangover feeling to the overall piece. Then once we established all of that, I was certain that a monopod and the Cinevate Cyclops would be the perfect tools to use because they are lightweight and mobile enough for me to convey the moods easily in my footage. And I tried to keep the footage from being extra sharp, so I didn't use a gear ring or a follow focus because I wanted the footage to feel sloppy and a little hungover. If you watch the video closely, there are even a few points I missed my focus, and it's all because I wanted the footage to contribute to the overall feeling of the piece. Most importantly, I made sure to use the mobility of my setup to get as many angles as possible. Doing this ensured that I would be able to have enough material to edit with in the end. All in all, it was a great piece to work on because I was able to capture the footage and edit all of it in one day. So that brings us to the end of the content and the end of today's webinar. And I do want to take a quick second to answer any questions that are kind of coming up in our live chat room. So give me a quick second while we get set up for that, and hopefully we'll get some good questions here, okay? All right, so what size CF cards did I use? So for me, I come from a photography background, so I'd rather have multiple flashcards instead of one. So I really stray away from using like anything larger than an 8 gig because I'm paranoid, and if I were to lose my one card, I would lose all my footage. So I use a combination of 8 gig, 4 gig, and 16 gig cards, depending upon the shoot. And I really like just 8 gig cards. They're just really nice and really easy to use. What type of lenses did I use for the truck shoot? Did I use primes? Did I use zooms? For that specific piece, I was actually traveling at the time. I was in Vegas, and I live in California and New York half the time, So for me to bring a lot of equipment was not possible. So I had to bring my camera, and I brought actually 2 lenses. I brought a 17-40 f4, and I brought a 24-70 2.8. And the most of the shots that I got for that piece, outside of the introductory shot, were on my 24-70. How did I pan the low shot side of the truck with the girl since I only used a monopod? Okay, so let me back up. I did use one extra tool. If you guys, some people are pretty savvy out there. There are a couple shots where the camera's moving, and that's a little bit of a teaser for our next webinar. The next webinar we're going to be talking about is camera movement. And camera movement involves a tool called a camera slider. And that's where you put a camera on like this little track, and you can move the camera very, very easily to capture some footage. So I didn't really lie. I just said, hey, I used a monopod to support the camera. The camera movement aspect of it is a little bit different, though. What software did I use to edit the footage? Did I use iMovie? Yes. So to edit the footage, I used iMovie. Now, there are some other things that I did throughout the presentation that I used Final Cut Pro X for to do the titling and stuff. If you guys are a PC user, I really recommend trying out or taking a look at Adobe Premiere Elements. It's pretty inexpensive, and it gives you a lot of editing capabilities. The great thing about iMovie and Adobe Premiere Elements is they're actually feeder programs into the full-based professional editors. That would be Final Cut Pro X and Adobe Premiere Pro. Let's see here. Looks like it looks like that's all it for the questions. I have a question about like a gear ring and a follow focus. So typically speaking, if you have a camera still lens that has a focus ring, very much similar to something like this. If I have a focus ring that's right here and a zoom ring right here, I can attach my lens gear from Cinevate either here or here, because sometimes people like to, zoom with use the gear to zoom a little more accurately, or use the gear to focus a little more accurately. The great thing about the Cinevate lens gear is it's one gear and it has different size spokes that actually fit into the gear, which allow me to kind of really streamline and that sort of thing. It's an inexpensive piece, so a lot of the times we really recommend having one gear per lens. So you're not removing lenses and removing gears off lenses and that sort of thing, okay? Well, anyway, I do really want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Now, as we continue through this webinar series, I really hope that you leave each session more confident and willing to try some of the things that we talk about. Now, I can remember the first time I switched my camera from stills to video and thought to myself, what am I doing? And here I am, a couple years later, trying to help all of you do the exact same thing, to flip that switch from stills to video, because we want you to move beyond the still and closer towards your inner filmmakers. So if you guys are still with us, evidently we have a lot more questions coming up. So if you're still with us, hang out, and we're going to answer some questions right now. Give me a quick second to check in with my production team, and we'll get started. Are we live and everything? We good? Okay. So one question is, how can I increase the recording time? 20 minutes is just not enough. So let's give you some background on this question. DSLRs like the Canon and Nikon DSLRs, they're capped at how much they can record per clip. So the minute I hit start on my record, from the time I hit start, I have X amount of time until I hit stop before I'm tapped out. Now for me, using a tool like this to create video, I don't find that as a hindrance that I'm capped at my clip limit. What it forces me to do is it forces me to look for different angles. As you're using your cameras to create video, there's 5 perspectives you should always think about. There's the perspective that you have as a photographer. There's the perspective of the third person. There's the perspective of the piece. There's the perspective of where you're putting the piece. And then there's probably like a low angle or a high angle perspective. Now, I think about all those perspectives as a way to circumvent recording time. Because when I get into the editing room, if you really look at a clip that's 29 minutes long, it's really not compelling at all. So the way to kind of break that up is to have multiple angles and to do multiple things with your camera so that you have stuff to cut to. And earlier in the webinar, I talked about something called cutaway material or B-roll or that sort of stuff. That's what we use to kind of help cut up the sequences a little bit. Let's see here. Supplemental lighting. So for the piece, did I use supplemental lighting or reflectors? The piece that we did in the desert with the blue truck, I did not use any lighting. If you take a look at some of the production stills, though, you'll see like a strobe light. I didn't use that at all. That was for the photography. What I used during the piece was exactly what you saw. I used on the slide. So let's bring up that slide, one of those slides. So the equipment I used on this specific shoot was my Canon 5D, my Canon 24-70. I used a Benro monopod. I used a Benro ball head. I used my Cinevate Cyclops with like attached to like a quick release plate. And then I did use a variable ND filter because when you're outside, as photographers, we should always have 2 filters on us, polarizers and variable NDs. So I just had those with me, and I just popped the variable ND on so that I could keep the aperture wide open and kind of capture my footage accordingly. Let's see. How large of a crew did I use on the desert shoot in Las Vegas? Okay, so it was me and Pete. Pete was the photographer. I was the videographer, so to speak. And then we had 2 guys shooting production stills. They were shooting the behind-the-scenes photos that you guys saw. So for the video aspect of it, I did the entire video by myself, operating the camera by myself. I kind of directed the talent by myself. So this is what is so exciting about HDSLR stuff. I mean, I think there's even there's a slide. Go to slide 62. If you go to if we look at here, this is what's so neat about HDSLR stuff. I took the camera and I literally put it on the hood of the vehicle, you know, and then I moved it, and then I did this. I go to slide 60. And then I stood far away, and I got on my tippy toes. I'm a short guy, so I got on my tippy toes, and I got up really, really high to get a different shot. I'm able to really leverage the size and mobility of the DSLR to create the video that we really want. Let's take a look at another question here. Color correction. Any free resources or tutorials out there that you can share? Okay, so I'm going to talk about color correction really, really quickly. For the purposes of what we did today, I needed to worry about color correction in 3 places. In my camera, at my computer, and then while I was editing. So there's a couple things I did. So to handle the color in my camera, I'm going to push you guys, and Brian will send out a link to the chat room right now. There's a great tutorial online for in-camera color grading. That's what I did. It's very quick. It's very easy. If you guys remember last webinar, I talked about using auto white balance and that sort of stuff. And I also did say that as you kind of increase in your skill level, you're going to want to do something different. So Brian will have this link, and he'll push it out to you through the chat box. So look for that link. It's an amazing tutorial, and it will teach you a lot on color. Okay, now for my computer, because I wanted to make sure that the color I saw on my monitor was correct. So I used a tool from X-Ray. It's called an i1 Pro, and it allows me to calibrate my screens to ensure that the color that I saw when I was capturing the footage is the color that I actually was seeing when I was editing it. And then during the editing process, inside of like iMovie, I can shift the colors just a little bit to kind of either make them more red or more green. And that's kind of how I just edited the color. And that's just very, very, very basic stuff. As you get more experienced and as you start doing more, you're going to want to get plugins. You're going to want to start doing real color grading and that sort of thing. And there's plugins available. One of those companies is called Red Giant. Great company. Okay, let's go to the next question here. What is an alternative to using a Cyclops if you don't want to use a viewfinder? So if I'm in a situation where I don't want to use a viewfinder and I still want to check my framing, or if I need to do more than just measure out for focus, there are external monitors out there. And external monitors will actually plug in right here to the side of the camera through your HDMI port. Okay? You plug that monitor in, and that's a great way to check your framing. You can zoom in on the monitor and check your focus and that sort of thing too. There's a number of brands out there, and just pick the one that works best for you. Let's see here. Does Cinevate make an adapter to put Nikon lenses on my Canon? That's a great question. Okay, so let's roll back the conversation. There are obviously 2 kind of camera bodies out there that every photographer is using, right? We're using Nikons and we're using Canons. The great thing about Cinevate is we have an adapter that allows me to use my Nikon lenses on my Canon body. So the purpose of, what's the overall purpose of this? Well, you can go and pick up like a really old used set of lenses. Like you pick up like go to an old camera store and pick up like a set of old Nikors, and then be able to affix that adapter to it and use it on your Canon body. And so that way you can have, a set of primes that work specifically with your Canon. Another great thing about that is the Nikkor older lenses still have aperture rings, and that's a great way to manually control your exposure because the Canon lenses don't have aperture rings. Okay, let's see. We're just going to keep on going. We're just keep on going. Okay. Any discounts on Cinevate? Okay, so the question is, are there any discounts on Cinevate? And the answer to that is, in the month of March, there is a March moving sale. And that March moving sale offers 25% off of a select group of products, which include the Cinevate Cyclops, which include the grip gear and lever kit, which also include like some other things like maybe a tracking system and Simplus. Now, the cool thing is, if you want to go and play with the gear, you can walk into your local retailer and ask them to see Cinevate, and they should be able to hand you over a piece that you can play with and kind of see how it actually works. So everyone who's in Seattle, to LA, to New York, to Dallas, you can actually walk into a camera store and actually be able to check out some Cinevate firsthand. Your next question here. Do I ever use a sound engineer? Any suggestions or sound a future video topic? Okay, so that's like a three-part question. So we are taking you guys on a journey here. We're starting you off as photographers, and we're slowly revealing things about video to you that are interesting and that will help you grow in your development as cinematographers. Okay, so first part of that question is, for the first two webinars, I did not use any sound engineer. If you notice, I cut everything to music, which is why we use Triple Scoop, because Triple Scoop gives me the ability to pick from hundreds of different songs that will fit the mood and feel of my footage. Now, moving forward, as we kind of delve into this idea of video, we're going to attack the topic of sound. And we're going to attack, sound engineers and how you can record audio outside of just in your camera. So be patient with us. Let us reveal to you the process and everything, and I guarantee you by the end of this entire series, you'll be so well informed about creating video that I think you'll be very happy with your results. Okay, so with that shoot, if you guys really noticed about the whole piece, the video was graded one way, and then the stills were graded naturally. They looked a little different, right? So I'm gonna be very honest with you guys. So Pete and I had a long discussion about whether or not we should match the stills to the video, and then I went and I did it, and then it was a personal decision for us to keep the stills one way and the video the other way. We could have very easily matched the stills to match the video and given it a through piece. But with time constraints and kind of like how we have to kind of just build stuff right on the fly, we decided to keep the stills different. It was just a choice. Is it easy to match the still with the video? Yeah, it's very easy. You can do that actually in iMovie. You can actually match stills. So that's the overall. That was the overall decision. Let's take a look at another question here. Okay, so it looks like I'm at the end of the question list. I'm going to give you guys one last opportunity to ask one more question, and if that's it, we'll be done. The next webinar is going to be in about a month from now. It takes us about a month to build the content. It's going to be on camera movement, and that webinar is going to be broken up into a basic camera movement webinar and then an advanced camera movement webinar. We're really going to focus on teaching you guys about why you move the camera, about how you move the camera, and when to move the camera, and then when not to. So it's a lot of material, and we wanted to break it up and make it really digestible. And hopefully by watching today's webinar, you like and enjoy the process by which we kind of explain things. And so just stick with us, and I guarantee you it's going to be a great webinar. We have some great ideas for some great videos. So I think that's really it here. All right, guys, thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys sticking around, and we'll clean up the question part for next time. So we'll make sure that it's a little bit more cohesive. Okay? So thanks a lot. Have a great day.